Hello, friends. Happy Thursday. I've got, like I said on the pre-stream, I'm not happy that Jake's not here, but I'm a little bit happy that Jake's not here because we've got an epic.
That's not what you said before.
That's not what I said before we were live, but an epic cast here of the father of science himself, Matthew Russell, as I heard on a recent Interplanetary Pod. And the man who Elon Musk gets his Starship launch news from, Eric Berger, based on what I've seen on Twitter lately. How's it going?
It's going great.
Well, it doesn't look like you were right, though, so, when he was reading your launch news. So, or you were right at the moment,
yeah.
But you're not right in the long span of history.
At the moment, they were targeting April 10th, and then they decided to take some more time. So
A quasi week based on the tweet. So I'm doing, this is the international hand gesture for tilde.
That's quasi-week, is it?
Yeah, that's a tilde.
I mean, 7 days is technically a week, so I'm not sure you need quasi in front of it. But
Well, why did they put the tilde in front then? Or not a tilde? Which one is it? It's not a tilde. Is that a tilde?
I don't think they want to get locked down to a public date yet, so they're just sort of being fairly coy. Because once you sort of set a date, people start to make travel plans and they get mad about that. And then if you don't hit that date, then people are like, oh, they missed another launch date. So
That's true. They start canceling their plans for the Space Symposium, for instance, which nobody should do. I should mention this up front once again to plug for everyone that will be at Space Symposium. I'm going to be doing a ton of live shows at the Space Symposium. There's going to be 5 Mikos and an Off-Nominal live at the Redwire booth. It's going to be crazy.
That looks amazing. I have to tell you, I'm happy to have an excuse not to go to Space Symposium.
Fine. You weren't invited anyway on any of these casts. So, that's how much I care.
If I could have made it, would I have been invited?
Yeah, 100%. You'd have had a pick of the litter here. Yeah, for sure.
I could have been on all of them.
You could have been on all the shows. 5 Mikos and an Off-Nominal, Matthew Russell every time. I honestly probably would have done that. Just hold court in the middle of the conference. It would have been amazing. So, anyway, that's not what we're here for today. But if you are at Space Symposium, come hang out. I got stickers. I got Off-Nominal stickers. I got new Miko stickers. I've got little cards printed that have the show art on them. It's going to be sweet. So, come hang out. At least one of them will be having some happy hour beers live for, which will be asked. And I should mention, I didn't say this last week because we didn't have guests, but we'll have based right now until everyone changes their plans for Space Symposium travel. The live show will have Michael Sheets of CNBC, Lauren Grush of Bloomberg Now, and then Jacqueline Feldscher of Payload will be hanging out with me for the Off-Nominal live. So that will be a fun cast to crack a beer with. And on that topic, did you guys bring some drinks?
I did.
Yeah,
I brought mine.
What you got?
I went out and I brought. It's really rubbish. It's called Juice Forsyth, which is actually a play on Bruce Forsyth. I don't know if you even know this character over there. He's a sort of major TV character over in the UK. He's dead now, but he was like an anchor for about 50 years. But I just the fact that it has the word juice in it.
Yeah, this is the one you could find that was plugging juice.
Yeah, I should be flying the flag there. You know, I don't know how Bruce Forsyth fits in, but it says something pretty grim. Juicy bonus fruited IPA. I'm not sure I'm going to enjoy the drink. But
He's doing it for the show.
Have it now.
Eric, did you bring something Texan for us?
I brought a Shiner Bock because
Classic.
I had in my fridge, and we've got an orbital flight from Texas coming up here in a couple weeks. So
It's happening.
got to celebrate that. You know, we've never had a rocket. Well, we can debate whether Starship's going all the way to orbit. But we've never had an orbital launch attempt from Texas before. And so what better way to do it than with the biggest rocket ever built?
That's pretty Texan.
Very Texan.
Go big or go home, right? Yeah.
The most Texan of all time. Yeah.
That is.
If you ask ChatGPT to tell you about what rocket Texas would make, they would pretty much nail it.
Yeah, it would have a hat on it as well, though, wouldn't it?
I've got a somewhat thematic. I got a Hop Devil, so that's a little bit Star Hoppery. Remember Star Hopper? I can't make this focus on the devil.
Star Hopper's the best.
It's the best. Star Hopper is the goat.
It is the GOAT. It's still there. It's still. I talked to the guy who actually was the site director when Starhopper flew and made the decision to put it out front for everyone to see. They were going to scrap it.
Well, now it's like a weather station and a Wi-Fi hotspot and all sorts of stuff.
It's also very good, sort of, in terms of as a size indicator.
That's true. Good shade, good spot to eat lunch, I'm sure.
And I mean, it's not small. It's pretty big if you actually walk up to it, but it just sort of sits there like this tiny little thing when you see the full stack.
It was really epic, wasn't it, when that went? And it's kind of hard to remember. It's like it's trying to remember a time before ChatGPT. It's a similar sort of experience. It's like life as chat. I can't. It seems a bit poxy now.
It was a while ago. It was 2018.
2019.
2019. Yeah, March, wasn't it?
Flown in. No, I think it was July. The first 20-meter hop was like July, and then next one was August or something. 150-meter flight. I got to walk underneath it right after it flew. It was pretty cool. I think we're going to have the same kind of phenomenon like before and after Starship's flight, because, at Space Symposium and lots of space conferences, you go and you listen to sort of all these plans, and people are talking about, well, we're going to do this, this, this. And if you sit there and think about like, well, how does Starship either help or disrupt this particular plan or business? It's like, it really completely changes almost everything. All this volume, all this mass to space on a potentially fully reusable system. It disrupts a lot of things. And I get the sense that like a lot of the industry is sort of not really calculating that into their long-term plans yet. But once it actually flies, I think that is really going to switch. And so we're going to kind of be in a before Starship and after Starship era. And to be fair, it's going to take some time for them to work the kinks out. And the first one may go boom. But, this is a pretty mature rocket that's out there on the test stand. I mean, you don't throw together some metal and some engines and just light it on fire. I mean, they put a lot of engineering into that.
Yeah, wow. It's going to be mind-blowing. It's going to blow my mind if what you're saying is even remotely true. But it's true with everything, isn't it? And like when something comes along, and then everything's gone and everything's changed. Yeah, maybe this is.
It has to work. It has to work technically. They have to get there in terms of reusability. But once again, the habitable volume inside a Starship is bigger than the International Space Station. I mean, think about how many launches it took to get the International Space Station on orbit. It took what, 1998, 15 years. It took a long time.
Are we going to fight about space stations this early in this episode? Or
no, we're not. I thought we were going to mention the European Space Agency.
Oh yeah, I'm ready for that part. That's for sure. But I mean, we did end the last time you were on about like, well, what if you just flew a Starship up and made that a space station? Yeah. Not to be the guy who's like, what about Starship taking over all the jobs? But
no, we had other things to talk about.
Yeah.
So why don't we do that?
The European. What was this thing called? The Revolution Space? Is this report? This report? Is that what it's called? Anyone remember what the name of it was? Nobody's got any. Well, I was like the
no.
All right, you make me pull up the PDF. I'll pull up the PDF.
We really prepared.
Is this one of these?
Yeah.
This was the thing that they want to do a moon landing in 10 years?
Yeah, I thought that's what we were going to make fun of. This wish list of epic proportions.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think about that, Matt? What do you think about that plan when you look at it?
Do you know what? My last few weeks has been very much focusing on ESA science rather than
that. My friends,
speculative report.
That my friends is an asteroid deflection. But so I'll speak candidly. First of all, let me just say, I like Joseph Aschbacher. I think he's a good leader for ESA. Is trying to do the right thing, but it's essentially like the United States Congress was making space policy for NASA and them alone, without sort of any executive branch. And there's 30 members, something like that, a few dozen members, and every like in the U.S. Congress, every state wants its funding back. In ESA, every state wants its funding back. So it's very hard to move forward with sort of projects that are really the best for ESA or best for Europe, because you have to really distribute the funding. And so they have grand ambitions. They're sort of trying to they're looking around at the industry and they're seeing what China is doing, seeing what the United States is doing, seeing what the commercial space industry is doing, and trying to figure out their place. And they came out with this report. It's called Revolution Space. I'd forgotten the name. Thank you, Anthony.
I'm here. That's why I'm here.
The first major suggestion was human spaceflight, developing human spaceflight. Europe must have the capability to put humans into space. And then secondarily, they said we should also think about doing our own moon landing in 10 years, which is insane because that could never happen. Like it took Europe, it's going to take Europe a decade at least to develop an upgraded version of the Ariane 5, right? And the Ariane 6 is a great rocket. I'm sure it's going to be great. But at the end of the day, these are pretty incremental upgrades to the existing launch system. And so anyway, you're not going to the moon in 10 years. You know, I would be just as skeptical if the United States made that kind of claim. And so that struck me as really weird. Like most of your nations, or a lot of your member nations, are already part of the Artemis program, which has a decent shot of making a human landing. I'm not sure it's guaranteed, but it's got a decent shot. So I guess, what do you guys think about Europe trying a moon landing?
Isn't it one of these reports where you stick it out and you set the bar so high that when the bar comes down, it doesn't seem too bad? Is that the purpose of it? Because
anchoring the negotiations.
Yeah, it's because it is ridiculous. Obviously, 10 years to get to anyone to develop a moon lander is a moon landing mission is ridiculous. I would have thought. You've done it once.
Well, especially since you've never launched a human into space. I mean, the United States did it in 1960. Like they launched the Gemini missions and the Mercury missions, and then went to the moon in a decade. But that was a pretty special case. And I guess I just don't understand what Europe's strategy here is, because maybe you don't like riding Crew Dragon to orbit. I understand that. Like SpaceX has been pretty bad for the commercial launch industry in Europe. And you don't like Elon Musk. Hey, I understand that too. But, if you look at the ESA budget, which is about 6 billion euro a year, something like that. Is that the right ballpark, Matt?
I don't know. Not off the top of my head. That sounds about right.
So, I mean, if you're going to develop human spaceflight capability, doing it the institutional way that Europe will do it, right? They're not going to go commercial crew, commercial cargo, that kind of program, because they don't have the commercial space industry, frankly, to support that kind of activity right now. That is 60 or 70% of that budget for the next decade, I would guess, right? Because crewed spaceflight is not cheap. Like, when did they announce the Gaganyaan program? It was like 2018?
That sounds right, too, yeah.
Or 2017. And their original goal was like to do it in 2022 or 2023. And this was like basically a Soyuz-like spacecraft, right? Very sort of stripped down, simple. And they're just going to space and coming right back. And now they've already pushed that out to 2025. And of course, India labor is much lower than Europe. So I don't understand, A, the justification really for it, but B, if you're going to do it, you'd almost have to double ESA's budget. And like I said, I just don't see how that is a strategic capability that Europe needs right now. Do you feel differently about that, Matt?
Absolutely not. I mean, doubling the budget seems ridiculous, and it's clearly way more than doubling the budget. Surely, it's a whole.
Somebody's got 4.9 billion euro in 2023 was the budget. So.
Okay, see you would need almost all of that, I would guess, every year for a decade to get a human spaceflight vehicle. I would guess.
Yeah,
close to it.
Especially in that model, right? Like the public-private partnership situation here with NASA is the incentives make sense for trying to get costs down for individual spaceflight units per se. But there's also the other aspect, and I think we talked about this on the space station front last time, Eric, was that doing it in that way is essentially exporting part of your budget requirements to people that think they can find a business case for whatever that thing is. So they go and invest. In some cases it was like we expect 50-50 investment on like some of the smaller public-private partnership deals that NASA signs, or like emerging technology kind of deals. Like they expect 50% of the budget to come from the private individual or company that's doing the work. So it's a way to like create budget where you don't have enough of it in the first place, and that you don't have to get the political world to agree on putting that much budget towards it. You can basically say, well, we'll get half the amount of budget we need, and then hope that there are people that take the shot and put the other half up. So yeah, without having that to lean on to the same level with, there's European launch startups now that seem to be making pretty good progress, and certainly ESAR Aerospace just got another $165 million, so they're doing well so far, but they're working on a 1-ton launch vehicle. Doing it the old style, where you had to do it all yourself as a publicly funded endeavor, is enormously expensive, and Europe doesn't exactly have not a lot on their plate at the moment. There seems to be some other things going on that might require some budget. So, it's not the best time to go out searching for money.
No, here's a question for you. Like, NASA spending presumably is that floats above everyone's radar, right? Like, if you're an average American, you think about NASA spending. Do you? Because in Europe and certainly Britain, I think ESA spending is like, it flies massively under the radar. No one talks about it. It's never on the news. I mean, like, it is never on the news. So
I think we have the opposite thing here, where people think that we spend way more on NASA. Everyone thinks we spend multitudes more than we do on NASA, just like socially,
But yeah, exactly. But you still talk about it. Presumably, it's like a sort of, there's a lot of national pride, I would have thought, with NASA, but presumably Americans, they talk about.
I mean, I'm
NASA
not like
budget.
shopping at Whole Foods and having conversations about the NASA budget. I might be, but that's just me. That's not going on next to me.
Does it come up on news? I mean, does it come up on news programs? Is it just sort of.
There is a surprising amount of coverage of just regular commercial crew missions on my local NBC affiliate, as an example. Like, they just cover that as like we're coming back from commercial break. Here's Elon Musk, SpaceX launching some more people, which is how it's always phrased.
There is definitely a current in U.S. politics where people think that we should not be spending money on spaceflight because there are people starving here. We have climate change problems on Earth. Why are we wasting this money shooting it up into space and supporting Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and that sort of thing? But it's not a major issue. I guess the point I would make is I don't understand why ESA, which has 1/4 of the budget that NASA does, and that's a political decision. They certainly could have a larger budget if Europe wanted to. They could probably afford it, but they've made that choice. Why ESA sort of would put out this strategic document, which basically tries to do what NASA did with developing Commercial Crew, which has been a decade-long program in terms of getting a replacement for the space shuttle. They wanted 2 providers, and then the Artemis program. Like, why would you do those 2 same things if you don't have the budget for it? It makes zero sense. I think if I were in charge of ESA, which my French is not very good, so I don't think it would work. But if I were in charge of ESA, I would say, what are Europe's strengths? And then I would double down on those. Like, okay, we're not the commercial. We're no longer because Ariane dominated commercial launch for a long time, but they don't anymore. They got a piece of the Amazon launch contract because Amazon wanted to launch any company that wasn't named SpaceX. But they're not going to, the commercial launch business is not great for them looking forward. And so what do they do well? What could they do if launch is cheap and abundant? What could you do in space that is meaningful and additive? And I understand you keep sort of a national launch, an institutional launch capability. I totally get that. I think that's very smart decision. But you ought to be looking around and saying, in the 2030s, what could Europe be doing that other countries aren't? that would be beneficial for Europe and beneficial for space overall. And that's, I think we are definitely headed toward, and Anthony and I have talked about this, where in the 2030s, low Earth orbit, the U.S. space stations may or may not make it. But if Europe wanted to have a space station, it could be like a thing. I mean, NASA, I think, would love to have a European alternative, right? Then it could say, okay, well, we're going to, sorry, nanoracks, sorry, companies, we're going to sort of rely on this European space station. Or just find your strengths and leverage those, and don't try to recreate what NASA has spent 10 or 15 years and a lot more money with a much more vibrant commercial space industry trying to do. It's just, I don't get it.
Two ways to go on that one, especially the fact that NASA has spent all this money on that, and one of the two providers has worked out and the other one has not. And once again, we're in this scenario where SpaceX is such an extreme outlier that it is like mind-boggling to try to make
that is the exact
around.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the institutional companies in Europe, Ariane Group, Ariane Space, that is Boeing. That is not SpaceX. I mean, I've written 2 books now on why SpaceX is successful. And it is because they work long freaking hours, right? They have a dedicated visionary, personal issues aside, and like they go hell for leather at what they do. And the really important thing. So I was talking to Bülent Altan, who worked at SpaceX and avionics for a long time. And he was interesting because he decided after about a decade at SpaceX, because he's Turkish, he lived in Germany for a while, he was going to go back to Europe because he wanted to be closer to his family in 2014, 2015. And he said, I wanted to see how things looked on the other side of the fence. So he went and worked at Airbus for 6 months as like head of digital transformation and innovation, but basically came in to sort of try to push them forward, modernize them, and make them more competitive. And he said the CEO had a great vision, and I really liked the leadership. The CEO would say things, and they couldn't affect change, right? You could not move through the layers of middle management and sort of culture at the company. And for better or worse, at SpaceX, which, as Anthony said, is this huge outlier, when Elon snaps fingers, you either fall in line or you quit or get fired. And I mean, it's just, so I guess the point I was making is that it's commercial crew succeeded because SpaceX is the way it is, right? And Boeing may come along 4 or 5 years later and have a similar capability, but the European experience is going to be much more like Boeing than it is SpaceX, I think.
What's the chances of a European Elon Musk suddenly coming onto the scene, though? I mean, as in, you've got pockets of commercial people making rockets. What if suddenly one of those goes full on Elon Musk and does a similar sort of thing? You could imagine it might happening, but there's no sign of that, right? But it could happen.
There is no sign of it. I do wonder about European labor laws and whether sort of the really insane work culture at SpaceX and some other U.S. space companies would fly in Europe. Maybe. I don't know. And the other thing is right now, Ariane Space and Ariane Group have such a stranglehold on ESA's budget that it would be difficult, I think, to get the commercial cargo and commercial crew programs that got cargo and people to the International Space Station. I mean, those were really force multipliers for SpaceX back in 2006, 2009, and then throughout the 2010s. It just really, that government funding they were able to use that to really vastly move forward much more quickly than they would have otherwise. And I don't see the political initiative for those. I mean, they're giving like $10 million launch contracts and things like that through Boost, I think, to these companies in Germany and England and Spain and France. But, the commercial cargo development contract basically got was $400 million, and that was back in 2006. And in 2009, they got a $1.8 billion operational contract to fly, 8 missions. And so that's the kind of money you really need to be putting into these commercial companies. And I just don't see the political will yet. Aschbacher, I think Joel Aschbacher, the head of ESA, would like to do something like that. But so far, his hands have been pretty tied.
Yeah, I guess it'd be harder because you'd be giving such a big chunk of money into one nation's area. It's like
that's the thing. It's like you have a fundamental tension right now between Germany and France, I think, and I don't understand the space politics in Europe particularly, but my basic understanding is that some of the most promising rocket startups are in Germany, and Ariane's boss is based in France, and so you have a real tension there between the German government would like to see more ESA funding going to support the micro-launch startups, and the French government would like to keep that money home in France. So,
and Italy's like, does anyone need solid rocket boosters though? Because like we got them. So
got them, and sometimes they don't blow up, right? So.
In terms of the things that you were saying, Eric, like double down on the things that you got and like make that shine. Tali Zelenia licking their lips at that thought. Like, boy, do we make some good pressure vessels. We fly a lot of Cygnuses a year. We've got all these parts of the space station built. We're building parts of the Gateway. We're building parts of the space station that may or may not still have funding from Axiom. Like, there's a solid chance that the European Space Station is whatever Axiom's currently funding via Tali Zelenia that doesn't make it, and they end up launching it later, Nauka style. Hopefully better than Nauka, but, you know.
I mean, they make great pressure vessels. They could make a European commercial space station. They could make a moon base, right? I mean, build pressure vessels for the moon. They're already doing that for Gateway. I mean, it's just, I would find ways to be additive rather than trying to replace that. Unless you're like, we don't trust America, and hey, I mean, if Europe wants to look that way at the United States over some of its actions over the last 5 to 7 years, hey man, I see that. But it's difficult to go on your own in space with a human spaceflight program in low Earth orbit and beyond.
Yeah,
that's the bipolar.
The way I see it, I mean, Europeans are always going to get on better with America than they are. You know, we were hand in glove with the Russians, and look how that's turned out. You know, it's better than the enemy. You know, it's a completely different kettle of fish.
It's very clearly a bipolar world in spaceflight in the 2020 and 2030s. I mean, there's the United States, the Artemis program, and there's China's program, which they're letting Russia sort of have co-leadership on, but that's China's program. And and I just saw today, like they were trying to get Venezuela on board with, I think, their moon program. But it's the United States is signing up people for its program, and China's signing up people for its program. So you've got to sort of pick one. And I think ESA did that, right? They're no longer training, astronauts are no longer training to go to the Chinese space station, which was a big diplomatic kerfuffle within NASA for a while. The fact that they were training to go to the Chinese space station. So I just think that choice needs to be made.
I've always had a fun conspiracy theory angle on that Samantha Cristoforetti was just like an excellent plant to go get some intel and then report back. She was just like sent over as, she'll pass muster over there, like go snoop around and then come back and debrief us on what's actually going on with the space station program. I don't think that's true, but I feel like I could write a good conspiracy theory around this.
I don't think that's true either.
Well,
no, I don't think so. But what if it was? It would be pretty epic. I'm just saying.
Well, why
One
not?
of us is a journalist here, is all I'm saying. FOIA some records.
Who, Matt? Matt's a journalist.
Yeah.
Definitely not. I'm just a humble podcaster, as you can tell.
Let's be real, though. Is this strategy from the high-level advisory group purely bitter that, once again, your former colonies, the United States and Canada, are going to the moon before a European?
It can't be. That's
flying on an Airbus service module, by the way.
I just think it's wishful thinking. Surely it just seems because it comes as such a sort of it's so over the top and so ridiculous. I just think there's not as many eyes on it in Europe, as in it's like it's fun stuff to say. It might look good in a press release somewhere, and because it made it into my feed. The Europe says it needs to develop its own human spaceflight capability, and it's like, well, yeah, it's not going to happen anytime soon, and it sort of comes into the newspaper cycle and then disappears again. I think
But like
that's
over
kind
the
of
long
way.
term of history, they should at some point, like there should at some point be many spaceships flying from all of the places if our hopeful future of space turns out. So,
but I mean, it's like it's Britain. Britain was the ultimate. It gave up its space flight capability because it's like why bother? We've got mates over in America that will do it for us. It's like literally why bother? They're much better. They're just much better. They got more money, and that's it.
Matt, has there been any rumors there about an ESA, our European astronaut on Artemis 3, 4, 5? Like, what's the? I know the Japanese are negotiating to get a person on there, and I'm wondering, is Artemis 3 going to be all American, or is they going to try to put a international partner astronaut on that one?
I would bet there's a European astronaut that stays up in orbit or something.
Yeah, I mean that's the feeling that I've got is that there's a European astronaut in the pipeline that's coming. Yeah, but whether
because I assume 2 would stay on Orion and 2 would go down on Starship. So
that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Cristoforetti, Samantha Cristoforetti, the plant. We're sending her out there. Go. She's gonna spy on the Chang'e rovers. I'm gonna write an epic sci-fi book where she's a spy. It's great.
Okay.
She's never coming on this show, but
no, I don't think she is.
That'll just prove my point.
You've blown it now.
Yeah,
you've blown it for all of us.
Listen, somebody that I feel like I do have an in with is Christina Cook because I had to pull up this photo of her just being Phillied out up on the space station when she was up there last fall while the Eagles were making a run and the Phillies were in the playoffs. So she's welcome anytime to come and just be. We could do an entirely Philly sports themed show, and it'll be great. So just want to let everyone know that there's an Eagles fan going to orbit the moon for the second time. I presume that Pete Conrad, the hometown boy, was pretty into Philly sports as well. But I mean, just look at this wonderful photo of the Eagles getting prime time.
She's doing the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, but I'm sure she'll be right over, Anthony.
Hey, listen.
Next on our list.
We have niche pull, is all I'm saying. We got you on here. You can write a couple books. Real journalist.
So if we're going to transition the Artemis II crew, I think they're an awesome group. They all seem. I mean, I know a couple of them pretty well, and they're great people, and I just think they're very sharp and great representatives for North America. And it feels great. I mean, it's nice to have a crew named to a real moon mission. I've been waiting 50 years for that. It's great to see.
Yeah, I mean, for me when I saw it announced, it was one of those things. You presumably knew it was coming up, but it definitely does make it feel really quite real because it still seems a little bit of a fantasy to me.
Just
but then
stealing Eric's headline, aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of. Yeah, I mean, it really does though. It really does kind of make it. Yeah, it's like wow, that is, and they are legends as well. They're all really cool. They're all sort of superstars, aren't they? So it's. Particularly, I definitely do have a soft spot for Victor Glover. It was just his super smile when he was getting onto the space station.
The thumbs. He does the thumbs. Even there was that when he was announced. Was that the Artemis? What was that event, Eric, where they were like, "This is the Artemis core" or whatever.
The Artemis cadre.
Cadre, yeah. Cadre? Is that the one where he had that epic photo that I think was in your article?
No. That was in when they announced the commercial crew teams, and he was on Artemis, or he was on Crew 1 with Hopkins, and he came out on stage and was just super pumped up. That's him. I mean, he is an extremely positive, warm, genuine human being. And that will come through. I mean, he will be this. I think he will be the superstar of that crew, just because he is so good at speaking and just very good at conveying. That's it. See, right there. Just very passionate about it. And he speaks out on some social issues too. It's going to be really interesting to follow him over the next 2 years to see where he takes this, because he's an interesting guy.
It's fun to have. I feel like for so long we've been stuck in like having the same arguments about how Artemis should go, or what should get canceled, or what should get funded, and the reason I was so excited to be beyond Artemis 1 was to like, can we at least talk about some new stuff for now? And I'm trying to look at this all way more optimistically, that we can fight forever over like exactly how all this stuff should go down, but the stuff is going down. There is a flight to the moon with 4 people on it in the near future. How near is up for debate, but like, screw that for 5 minutes. Just be pumped that there are people going to the moon. It's awesome. It's totally awesome. And if this whole thing works out, though, like my son Will, who's 2.5, will have this as like his early childhood memories of people going to the moon, and it will be epic. When he's my age, it will be like Artemis 2 was an epic mission. I got a whole thing of stamps on the wall over here from the Apollo 8, the Earthrise photo that was made of stamps, and there's like the original 1960 stamps that somebody found in their attic once, gave it to me, and I framed it because it was epic looking. But like, that's the kind of stuff that will survive if all of this stuff goes really well. And I just want to linger on that for a couple minutes.
Well, every time Apollo comes up, in nowadays, often people say the Apollo 8 is still their favorite mission, right? So so Artemis 2 is like, it's going to be absolutely epic, isn't it? And it is, but I mean,
Apollo 8 was special in that it was the first time it happened, and it was right around Christmas, and so it had a lot of sort of novelty going for it. Now, none of the people, 2 generations were not really alive and sort of cognizant of the world around them when that happened. So there will be a lot of people for whom this is all brand new, and NASA certainly has learned a lot about promotion in the 55 years since Apollo 8. So I mean, it will be epic, and it is. I agree, Matt. It's coming sooner, I think, than we think. The rocket, even though it torched the hell out of the launch tower, I've heard the damage was quite a bit more than was really let on.
But just an elevator.
To fix that. And not just an elevator door. And then Orion, Orion, they've got to put some life support stuff in it, but they've been working on that for years. I mean, it's the hardware, I think, will be ready. I think that'll be a mission we'll be flying within 2 years. I feel pretty good about that. Yeah.
What's that next gap?
Yeah.
Then there's a huge gap between Artemis 2 and Artemis 3, and then a huge gap between Artemis 3 and Artemis 4. That's going to be pretty painful. I mean, I would put the over-under on Artemis 4 right now at about 2030, and that's a long time from now.
Yeah, I'll take the over.
I mean, that's fair. And I think it's going to be really interesting because if you look at that 7-year period between now and then, let's try to imagine where SpaceX will be, because they will be moving much faster than the mobile launch tower and the exploration upper stage, by the way, Boeing is building. And so, I mean, are we going to see multiple Starship flights around the moon between now and then? Are we going to see Starships uncrewed flying to Mars by then? Are we potentially going to see lunar landings by private astronauts before 2030? I think all of that is in play, and it will be really interesting to watch sort of the private space race set against the NASA slower development, especially with Reliant. So there's this really interesting fusion in Artemis between old space, traditional space, and new space / which is really SpaceX. And SpaceX is, it traditionally has moved much faster than old space. And if they continue that, they're going to be doing these interesting things while NASA's sort of putting along, trying to get the exploration upper stage tested and yada, yada, yada. So I just think that'll be really interesting to watch. And it'll, we'll have to see if Jared Isaacman and his crew on Polaris 4, launched the moon and are taking pictures of, the Apollo 11 landing site or something like that. Because that's certainly possible if they really start cranking out Starships. I mean, if Starship launch operations become like the Falcon 9, and there's no reason to think they won't, right? SpaceX knows how to build, launch, and land rockets. Then things get really interesting.
Yeah, not the worst bet in the world that Jared Isaacman walks on the moon before Artemis 4. It's not the worst plus 500 or 600 bet I would ever take.
Yeah. Certainly not before 3. I mean, SpaceX is going to go all in to support NASA on 3, and it's not want to upstage them. But I think after 3, all bets are off.
That's another scenario, though, like you were saying earlier, that where you were talking about just the purely like the first early launches of Starship here, that it's a change moment. If Artemis 3 happens on a reasonable timeline and there is a huge gap, it's not like Starship's not going to do anything in that medium time. So if there's frequent access to the lunar surface, I don't think there's a political will to ignore that as much as there would be like, all right, maybe we should adjust these plans a little bit, buy a couple more EUSs, keep flying the regular SLS version and not go all in on the co-manifested payload space, and just go down to the lunar surface as frequently as we can, once or twice a year or something like that. That becomes a more viable talking point if you're seeing multiple starships fly out to the moon, land with either payloads or people.
Yeah, I don't think it's crazy to. I mean, at this point, I would almost bet on a Saudi or a UAE astronaut walking on the moon before a European astronaut, just because of what we've seen with the Axiom missions, right? I mean, SpaceX will be selling if UAE wants to buy a lunar landing mission for $2 billion or $5 billion or whatever it ends up being. SpaceX will sell them that, and that NASA encourages its commercial providers to have other customers. So right. It's not like going to the International Space Station where you got to go through all these hoops with NASA. Like, you can just buy a ticket, I think, and go on Starship once the system is proven out. But it's going to be. It goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, where Starship is going to have all of these disruptive effects on down the line, and sort of. It's incumbent, I think, on the European Space Agency not to put its head in the sand and say, well, Starship can't possibly work, right? Because that was their attitude on Falcon 9 and Reuse when they were developing Ariane 6. Well, Reuse isn't a thing. Why would we build a rocket that takes that into account? And so it's to use the hockey, you've got to skate where the puck is going, not where it's at right now. And so I would just encourage Europe and other countries with space programs to think about where the puck is going, not where it is right now.
Another way to get to the heart of a European other than a hockey reference, for sure. That's the way.
Yeah.
Wayne Gretzky, that wonderful member of the Commonwealth.
I've only ever had a black eye from hockey, so it's not my favorite.
Wayne Gretzky, the great hockey and lacrosse player, 2 European pastimes.
Not.
Oh man. Well, there's that.
Well, I have to say, hearing Eric talk, that that's actually made me very much more optimistic about the whole future, because there's something I've been sitting here thinking that Starship is just preposterous, and the whole landing on the moon, doing the old belly flop maneuver, etc., and that how that looks incredible. It's going to look incredible if that whole thing works out. Like
oh, Matt, if it doesn't work out, it will also look incredible. When that goes wrong, it's going to look epic.
Well, yeah,
like on one of those test flights, that's just going to go. It's going to be unreal looking. Yeah, we're going to have WB-57 footage of it too. It's be crazy.
But like,
I would just go back
to the moon.
Regular is probably too strong, but I don't see why they couldn't do one commercial mission a year and one mission for NASA a year by like 2028. I mean, these things are built out of stainless steel. And, I don't see why they can't. I mean, they're going to have regular launches. And so let's say you fill it up with Starlink, but you have like 30% extra payload space or whatever. You just put fuel in that. And after you release your Starlink, you link up with a depot and drop off your extra fuel and then come back to Earth. I mean, it's just, they're going to be filling up these depots. And I think, they've got to demonstrate on-orbit propellant transfer. I think that's really the biggest issue at this point, is they've got to do that technology, and they can't really do that until they get Starship flying. But
there's Europe.
Let me take you back.
Europe, we can make depots, fuel depots. That's what we can make.
You can't though, because
the other specialty of European fuel as of late. That's been a real specialty of Europe, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fuel acquisition has been a real strong point in the last year.
But I think they'll get pretty close. I go back to so back in 2013, September 2013, SpaceX upgraded from the original Falcon 9 to Falcon 9 1.1, and this was the first time they used the Merlin 1D engine This was the sixth launch out of Vandenberg. And it was actually a super pivotal launch. But they had put all these upgrades into the Falcon 9 to make it a much more capable rocket. And it was the first time they were carrying satellites. Do you remember the original Falcon 9? Didn't even have a payload variant. It was for Dragon. And they had data, a little bit of data on some of those first Falcon 9s coming back to the atmosphere, but they really didn't know. But in September 2013, that very first Falcon 1.1 came back, and it came all the way down to the surface of the ocean. It actually lit its engine, and then it had a spin problem, and it slammed in the ocean. But they brought a fully intact Falcon 9 rocket back for the first time, all the way from, above like 150 kilometers. And that, okay, Starship's bigger, it's moving at orbital velocity, and that's kind of a big deal, but they're not idiots, right? I think they understand the physics of this, and I think they'll nail the landing of Starship in the first 3 or 4 missions, and just really then it'll be off to the races. They understand, like I said, they understand the regime they're working in, and I think they'll be able to sort of get it down.
I mean, certainly, John Young is still alive. Well, he's not anymore, but he was after the first shuttle launch, right? So, what was...
Where are we going with this?
Well, what was...
That's the strangest sentence.
No, I'm just saying, what was more wild? The first shuttle launch coming back through doing the same kind of atmospheric entry, or the first Starship coming back and doing it?
I mean, yeah, right.
And notably, the thing that delayed the shuttle for so many years was the tiles were falling off, and they were like, "Oh, Crippen and Young, why don't you hop up on in there and make your way back to White Sands?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure thing, no problem." And when they got back, they were furious that they did that because it didn't seem like they should have made it, but they didn't make it. And so all these years later, I don't know. I don't think the first one will make it, but I wouldn't be shocked at all.
I wouldn't be shocked, and I think that they'll get enough data that the second or third one will make it. At least a soft landing in the ocean that will be like, okay, we're ready. Let's get a platform, or let's figure out a place for it to land.
And how quick they gave up on the suborbital test flights once they landed one. They were like, we're good. Like, we got it. We've seen the data. We're good. We can move on with our life. That says a lot, that they were that confident in it, because they could have just kept doing those. They had plenty of Starships. It wasn't like they were low on Raptor engines or stainless steel. So if they needed it, they would have kept doing it.
Yeah. I mean, they could have gone. They could have sort of done a much more perfect landing, but they just decided, no, okay, yeah. I mean,
yeah, arguably they did 2 landings because there's that one that landed and then blew up, and then everyone can gatekeep whether that landed or not. So
I think if it blows up, it doesn't count as a landing. But that's just me.
Wow.
If you were an astronaut on board, I think you'd probably think the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
How quick can they make the deboarding process? Everybody go. Like a Southwest flight up in there.
Absolutely. Well, oh yes, I'm gonna try. This isn't very good beer.
It's not good.
A good title, but no.
Should we talk about juice a little bit? Let's talk about juice, Matt.
Juice.
You've been doing some juice specials. I've enjoyed. I do have to plug your. So you've had a 2-part juice special, and one of them was fairly informative in the era of what adolescent boys in England were into back in the day in poster shops, which was an unexpected little benefit of the juice episode.
I forgot about
that. Yeah, but so you're going to be doing the commentary of the show around the juice launch. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so the science section after the launch campaign, and from acquisition to solar array deployment, the sort of 2 big milestones once it's launched, once Ariane 5 has done its job, which we should step back and just say this is a launch next week. It's the penultimate Ariane 5 launch, right? And so that means second to last. And it's
that's why I always bring a journalist, folks.
We're taking it right back. English.
This is the first probe that Europe has built that's going to the outer solar system, and it's going to be freaking cool because it's going to look at the icy moons of Jupiter, as it says in the name, and then after a few years sort of zipping around the Jovian system, it's going into orbit around Ganymede, which is this fascinating, one of the sort of 4 big moons around Jupiter. Yeah. And it's going to be there at about the same. I'm sorry.
That'll be a first. That'll be a first. No one's managed to get around a orbit around.
No one has.
That's not.
That's exactly moon. Right. No probe has ever gone in orbit around a moon around. Yeah, exactly right. And that's super cool. And it's going to be awesome because in about a decade we're going to have JUICE and we're going to have the Europa Clipper, which NASA's building. Flying. They're not orbiting the moon. They're sort of doing flybys of Europa, and we're just going to have all this information about Jupiter and its moons that we really haven't had before. It's going to be an amazing time. So I think it's a super cool mission. And this, like I said, this is the kind of thing absolutely the European Space Agency should be doing.
Yeah, it's quite strange because it's snuck up the JUICE mission. I felt, and it's their large class. It's the first of the Cosmic Vision large class missions. It's an absolute big one. And like you said, it's not often that the European Space Agency gets something out to the outer solar system. So it's it's the only time, in fact, they've done it on their own. So it's
good at hitching rides.
Biggest, yeah, done a lot of hitching rides, but the largest solar panels. It's going to be. If all goes well, it's going to be absolutely epic. And that whole mission actually coming together with Europa Clipper and JUICE being there at the same time kind of gets them kind of where NASA and ESA wanted to be in the first place when they were sort of designing the mission together in the first place. And obviously the scientific community seems super stoked that
juiced
the whole Jupiter. Super juiced about it. That was because we're going to know more about Jupiter than anything else at the end of it. Like that sort of 5 years of data that's going to in the 30s that we're going to get there, presumably is going to be just a treasure trove.
How confident, Matt, should we be that this is going to work? And I don't mean that pejoratively, but like if JPL was doing this big cost plus contract to do a Mars lander, as an American, I feel like 90 or 95% confident that this is going to work pretty well because they've done it before and they've got some expertise and most of their deep space missions have worked before, but you do get problems. And so I'm just wondering, are you like 100% confident, like 70% confident? Like how good do you feel about JUICE hitting most of its science objectives?
I actually feel really confident. I think obviously the dangerous bit is around 5 and it did an epic job for James Webb, so there's no real reason to think that they're going to, it's going to do anything different for JUICE. There's some massive challenges with JUICE that Clipper I don't think has, because Clipper has a slightly more direct route to the outer solar system because it's got a more powerful rocket launching it. So but the fact that the fact that Clipper's got to go over to Venus, get boiling hot, and then go out to the outer system.
JUICE
obviously JUICE does, yeah.
JUICE, sorry, yeah, JUICE goes round Venus, and it's going to get super hot, and then go out to the outer Jupiter system. Means that obviously there's a whole heap of design things that have had to be done to kind of get over extreme heats and extreme colds, and everything still work. And massive solar panels and things like that have, solar panels of the size no one other than the International Space Station is flying with. So there's clearly.
We're in America, Matt. We need football field units, please.
Oh yeah,
football.
85.
Either kind of football does, yeah. Either kind of football should be fine.
How many football fields?
Give us a doing soccer fields. How many soccer fields big is this?
God knows. Oh my God! Yeah, no, we don't seem to measure things in soccer fields even. But they change. The football field can be a different size. There's no actual.
There's just a range. Size. Yeah,
I
like that.
It's on a spectrum.
I like that.
Yeah, so I think in answer to Eric's question, I'm pretty confident. And they've got like an 8-year cruise to iron out any problems. That seems to be, that after my little chat with Olivier yesterday, who's the project scientist, it was like, that entire 8 years is going to be taken up with planning the whole scenario when they're there. It's going to be, a lot of stuff to do while they're there and a lot of planning for that, and it's going to take all hands on deck for even that cruise phase. So I'm pretty confident, because we've had some really good successes. I think European Space Agency with things like Rosetta and things like that. I think there's good heritage there.
Huygens is one of the goats. Huygens is one of the goats for sure.
Yeah, and Rosetta was amazing too. I mean, just sort of the images of that were just fantastic.
And then when they found it and it was like on its side, remember the photo of like the shadow? Mm-hmm. That was a good one.
The Philae lander, yeah,
that's right. It was Philae.
Yeah.
I should know because it's like most of the route of the city I live in, but it should be a thing that I'm an expert in. But I don't think it's pronounced Philly, the Philly lander.
We need to wrap this up because I'm sure Christina Cook is calling your cell phone right now.
She's calling in right now. I can't wait till this show ends. All right, so you're going to be in Darmstadt. Is that right? Was that where you're going?
Darmstadt. Yeah.
Darmstadt.
I'm going to Darmstadt. Yeah, yes, and it'll be ESA TV.
And we can. Is there a live chat? We can heckle you,
interview. Or yes, there will be. So you can interact via social media.
Nice.
So you can try see if you can put me off my.
Let's throw them off. Yeah. Let's throw them off.
Won't be hard because that's the thing about those broadcasts. You've got a billion things going on in your ears as well. You've got.
We will all be in the chat saying how many soccer fields, how many soccer fields, how many soccer fields.
I will. Maybe that's. I think I'll brush up on my soccer fields.
You should drop one soccer field reference on the live stream.
Yeah, I will. Okay, for you.
Yes,
just say at some point, say for you Americans listening.
For you in particular, I'm going to work out how many soccer fields. How many soccer fields? Not the fields. Football fields. American football fields. It takes the solar panels. Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it for you.
We appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that. Eric, you mentioned you've been working on your book a lot. Is there any plugs, or you got some more to go first?
It's still a little more than a year from publication, so I don't want to talk about too much. But it is about the Falcon 9. It's great. It's lots of good stories about how the sausage was made, and it never stopped being scrappy or insane behind the scenes. I am working on a story right now about the ULA Centaur anomaly that happened a week or so ago. So hopefully maybe tomorrow or early next week I'll have something on that. Nothing too in depth. No one is really talking much on the record, but there are some interesting tidbits that I've sort of collected about that. And then I will be going to Brownsville Stadt next week for the Starship launch. So
I don't know what to do with that. Eric will not be on the live shows that we're doing at the Space Symposium, by the way. It says he is specifically avoiding the Space Symposium since I decided to go this year. So, once again, it's going to be pretty great. We've got Lori Garver's going to be hanging out with us for one of the episodes, along with Karina Dries, who's the president of the Commercial Spaceflight Federation. We've got Caleb Henry, who actually I think will be on the show next week. We went out to lunch today, and I convinced him to come hang out with me next week. He'll be there with me talking with Peter Beck of Rocket Lab and Jonathan Bailiff, who's the CFO of Redwire, which should be very interesting. We'll talk about finance and strategy, and both of them are some of the more stable SPACed companies. So it'll be interesting to chat about what they're working on. You can, but I mean, it's better than Virgin Orbit at this point. So,
well, I mean, yes,
yeah, that's going on this week. We didn't even talk about that, but that's a whole thing. So, mainenginecutoff.com/live. I have all the details there, and certainly people can hang out at the Off-Nominal Discord, which both of you have occasioned upon. I think you both have accounts, but it gets pretty wild in there. So. Don't go in there when you're on your live stream, Matt. We'll be heckling too much if that's the case. Don't turn on your notifications for sure. So.
Oh well, I'll have Discord though. Don't worry.
All right. Thank you both for hanging out. You're the best and helping me pass the time without Jake, who I think is still like 3 weeks away from returning. So. It'll be a while. Yeah, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It'll be a while, but we'll be here. So thanks again, guys.
Oh. No, thank you. Absolute. My.
See you.